I hope everybody is sufficiently coffeeed up and got enough food. Here's our second debate of the day of Debate-a-Palooza. I'd like to thank the candidates for coming today. Candidates for the 27th State Senate District C. On my far left, got Democratic Senator Fran Pavley, and on my immediate left, Republican challenger Lieutenant Colonel and Prosecutor Todd Zink. This is considered by many to be the #1 contested Senate race in the state this election. So it's very important. And this is the first time you guys been together?
Yes.
And this is the first time they've been together. There are only two candidates, these two candidates on the ballot. It's a runoff under the state's new open primary system. Okay, here are the ground rules. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for an opening statement. Then I'm going to ask some questions. And please limit your responses to 2 minutes each to those questions. And then at the end, then I'm going to open it up to the audience for them to ask questions, and 2-minute answers for those questions, and then there'll be a 3-minute closing statement. Helene will hold up a 15 seconds warning thing, which is yellow, and then a stop, and then a cowbell will go off.
I wondered what the cowbell.
Yeah, don't get to the cowbell stage like the congressman did. Anyway, let's get started. Question number 1.
Introduction.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Fran, I'm going to have you start with your opening introduction.
Thank you very much, and thank you for staying. And wasn't it nice to have Berman and Sherman as the warm-up act? Although I think we might have lost just a few people here. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and I want to thank VICA for holding this debate. It's sort of our warm-up act, if you will, as my opponent and I have several debates scheduled over the next month or so. So I look forward to that. After you listen carefully to our background experience, I hope you will agree that I'm the most qualified candidate to be serving in the state Senate. As a Valley resident by background, growing up in Sherman Oaks Elementary School, Milligan and Grant High School, went on to college, got a master's degree from Cal State Northridge, and at the same time juggling a teaching career out in Moorpark. My husband, Andy, taught for 31 years in the Las Virgenes School District, and education is a very high priority for me and our family, and that's why I've served on the Education Committee. We all know that an educated workforce is critical to our state's economic success, so education will continue to be a very high priority for me. In addition, my experience is in the following areas, and all these committees are incredibly important to the economic well-being of our great state. I currently chair the Water Committee for the state of California. Now, if you want to talk about politics, water policy in California is fraught with them. North versus south, rural versus urban. I've chaired that committee for the last 4 years. I welcome questions on water, water delivery, water supply, and how we can become more regionally self-sustainable. I'm also serving on the Energy Committee. I'm working very hard to protect California from what has happened in the past, and that's energy manipulation by Enron and trying to reduce our dependence on foreign oil by working collaboratively with the clean tech sector, putting together jobs, and working also with the Department of Defense. So I welcome questions on that. Is my 3 minutes already up? No. So you were flashing that sign?
Just to throw you off.
That sort of threw me there. I thought, I think I know 3 minutes as a teacher. I'm good at filling in the time period. And so energy issues are incredibly important, but a big opportunity for California. We have seen the creation of thousands and thousands of new jobs. And since the passage of some energy bills, and some of which I've authored, we have seen over $20 billion of venture capitalist money pouring into the state, creating R&D and innovation. And my responsibility, and one of my top priorities, will be to continue to work on creating those jobs right here, not just the R&D, but what follows up in the manufacturing and the businesses that come with those clean tech society. This will also allow California to better weather the up and down and the volatility of the energy sector, which is very important to our economy. The other committee I'm working on is transportation. I've served on the Transportation Committee in the state of California for all 10 years I've been in the legislature. And myself, I think if you represent LA and Ventura counties, you need to serve on the Transportation Committee. So
now 3 minutes is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Todd, 3 minutes.
Thank you for having me, VICA. Thank you, Stuart and Jason, for hosting this and running this. But my name is Todd Zink. I am running for the 27th State Senate District. And what I like to say is, if you don't know much about me, is my real experience over my lifetime will enable me to take on what I think everybody agrees is to the real problems we have in Sacramento. I believe my experience will bring leadership for a change to Sacramento, which is desperately needed. I am a husband, a father of 2 young boys. I've been a Marine Corps officer for 21 years, this time last year leading over 800 Marines and sailors in Afghanistan. And I'm currently a Deputy District Attorney in the County of Los Angeles, prosecuting serious and violent felons right here in this neighborhood in the San Fernando Valley. So this decision to run for office was a natural extension of my earlier decisions in life to serve the public. However, the public organizations I've had the privilege to work with before have been very result-driven. The Marine Corps has that reputation, as does the DA's office. Sacramento, unfortunately, does not. But I will promise you, as your representative, I will bring that philosophy with me to Sacramento. I am deeply concerned on California as a constituent, based on what I've learned. And I believe that California is, if you were to make an analogy, a large cargo ship at sea, who has no direction right now. And I believe the state is so bad that we're taking on water. And the reason I say this is not to be alarmist at all, but I believe we're failing at the basics you would expect any good government to take care of on your behalf, whether or not you live in Vermont, Kansas, or here in the great state of California. And those pillars of good government that you would expect is, first off, public safety, to secure your peace of mind, to go about your daily business, a business climate that is absolutely horrible in this state in terms of being able to create jobs to ensure your residents can be gainfully employed in this society that we live in. And then the last point is education. Only through education, a good education system, will we be able to secure the promise of what California ought to be. And quickly on each one of these points, public safety, I believe we should never put into jeopardy our public safety. That is a paramount obligation of our government. Right now with the realignment program, AB 109, our public safety is being put into jeopardy. And unfortunately, I believe you'll hear more about this as time goes forward. Steve Cooley, my boss, is very vocal against AB 109 and the effects that it'll have. Second, again, is business climate.
Okay, time's up.
Okay.
Hopefully we can elaborate on those as we move on. First question. Recent polling has shown that 9 out of 10 residents describe the state's economy as being in bad times. What is your plan to restore voters' confidence that our state is on the right track? And Todd, we'll begin with you.
I believe we need an attitude change here in California when it comes to business. The Republicans don't own business, the Democrats don't own business, the Independents don't own business. The fundamental thing is an understanding up in Sacramento that business truly is the backbone in our society. It affects every single person in this room and outside of this room in their daily lives, whether or not they're an employee or an employer. I believe what we need to do is have a bipartisan effort on this. In California, we have taken business for granted for decades now because of our immense resources here and our size of our population and our climate. We need to humble ourselves and actively recruit business back here to California. We need to level with business and sit across the table and say, what conditions would you need to see here in California for you to stay here and grow here so our residents can be gainfully employed? So I would be leading that effort as much as possible with, again, a bipartisan effort.
Fran?
Yes, thank you very much. A very important question and something that we've been working on extensively in the state of California. I wanted to share with you some of the things that are going on. One, Governor Brown has set up what we call GoBiz, which has put together really some great policies and opportunities for businesses. And some of the things it's done, including streamlining. For example, if you need a permit to put in a solar company or something like that, instead of dealing with multiple agencies, it's all put together in one expedited process. I will be part of the committee that will be looking at some reforms regarding the California Environmental Quality Act, that's CEQA, as far as some certainty in timelines. I have done just that by working with LA leaders regarding the football stadium and some other CEQA reforms. I also feel that we should look carefully at our tax credit structure. I was a co-author of the film and movie tax credit that's on the governor's desk, authored by Felipe Fuentes. We know in Southern California, the movie entertainment business, television business is one of our key economic engines. I've also have a bill on the governor's desk working with the Recording Artists Association regarding reducing piracy of CDs. So there are many things the legislature can do. We work collaboratively together, Republicans and Democrats, to make business a very high priority. It's absolutely critical to our success. And back to my education background, I really feel that our lack of investment, particularly in higher education, where the middle class finds higher ed not affordable and not accessible, is hurting us more than anything in attracting business and retaining business so that they don't go out of state looking for their employees.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Fran, what will you do to create jobs and help business in California?
Part two of the same question, is it not?
Yeah,
Let me
more or
share,
less.
Yeah, let me just give you some concrete examples, because it's easy to talk in generalities, and I'd like to share with you some of the things I'm working on. For example, this Thursday, I have a hearing out of Cal State Channel Islands. It's an interesting hearing. I have a bill on the governor's desk that creates a unique partnership between the Department of Defense, the state of California, and businesses right here in California. It'll be a hearing with military commanders, the Truman Foundation, which is a veterans group, some top business leaders, including the CEO of Capstone Turbine. Do you know them? They're right here in the San Fernando Valley, in Chatsworth. They're actually manufacturing products, not only just the R&D facility. This has the potential of not only attracting new capital and businesses to California, but really expanding our goals and efforts on national security, energy independence, and creating the jobs of the future. Connecting those all together with vocational training and educational training throughout our educational system really is a potential economic engine for California and is the fastest growing part of our economy. It's not the absolute solution, but it's one part of the solution, and I look forward to continue working on that.
Todd, what would you do to create jobs, help business?
I have talked to almost every sector at this point in this campaign of the state's economy, various industries from farmers to the film, to the biotech, you name it, I've spoken to them. Only, I believe, through balanced policies in Sacramento will we be able to attract and retain jobs back here in California. Right now, over the last several years, we've had over 400,000 businesses close their doors here in California. That is completely unacceptable. And in the depths of this recession, there are no serious efforts being done from Sacramento to attract and retain jobs. You would think in the depths of these recessions, and the depth of this recession, that greater efforts would be taking place from Sacramento. What we need to do is bring back these policies. Right now, the regulations that are on the books right now are simply strangling business. And this goes to any sector in our economy, whether or not they're in the service industry or in the product industry. The regulations are so high in this state that it's making it cost prohibitive to continue to do business in this state. So they're taking the manufacturing out of the state, or even that matter, their service industry out of the state. We need to look at the regulations. And if there's regulations, it's a cost-benefit analysis. When the regulation was written and the benefit is not being realized to have a net positive effect on our society and has a negative effect on our society, we need to seriously relook at these regulations as to the impact on our society. So I would make an effort to go through our regulations, and those that are outdated or simply making it so cost prohibitive to stay in business here, to revise those. And then lastly, we do need tax incentives to retain our most promising industries: biotech, UAVs, the commercialization of space, as well as electronic arts and virtual reality training. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The state of California faces ongoing budget problems, and reports say that it is not going to get any better anytime soon. What would you do to fix the state's budget deficit? Todd?
I think first off, I think voters understand this. Each voter out there right now is tightening their belts. They each have a household budget they're responsible for maintaining to keep a roof over their head, keep the lights on, prepare for retirement. They understand that Sacramento, if they were to make the same decisions in their own household, they would find themselves out on the streets. The problem is, it's our money, it's the tax, we earn the money, and we trust Sacramento to spend it wisely on our behalf. And the problem is, they don't prioritize the immense resources that we provide them in this state at all. And the priorities are what I talked about earlier in my opening. They're failing at the priorities of any good government when it comes to public safety, creating a business climate to ensure job creation and job growth, and failing our children and the promise of what California ought to be in its education system. So I believe what they need to do is we need to figure out, we need to bring awareness and openness to the public to demand from Sacramento that the common good, these priorities that take care of every single resident in this state, need to be at the front of the line when they spend our money. Not special interests that get head of the line privileges over the common good. That makes no sense. And that makes a weak foundation in our state government.
Okay, Fran?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think you have to look back just a little bit. Since 2008, we've had a huge drop on the economy, mainly because of the lack of regulation on Wall Street. That is what affected the state. There's been a $30 billion drop in our state budget. Schools get half of that. They're getting half of a lot less money. Who are the people out of work? Number one is the construction industry, because of the housing bubble and the subprime problems because of lack of deregulation. Number two are teachers, 38,000 classroom teachers. Now, I'm a history teacher by background, and I look back in state history on what we did during the times when we've had some dips in the economic recovery of the state, whether it was in the dot-com crash around 2000 or 1999 or before that. Well, when Governor Reagan, Governor Deukmejian, Governor Wilson, and even Governor Schwarzenegger were in office, and there was a drop in the economy, there was a compromise reached by both parties. They did cuts and streamlining and efficiencies, but they also raised revenue. They did both. all of them did both. This is the first time in the last 10 years where we can't have a compromise that looks at the revenue side. All we're doing is doing cuts. And frankly, that is hurting our recovery and delaying that. And so I am concerned. Every single Republican who's voted for any revenue increase since 2002 has either not run again or has been defeated in office. So that compromise, that requires give and take, and also making those cuts where needed, and coordinating with local governments and the federal government to streamline where appropriate is the best way to go.
Okay, let's talk about CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. There have been discussions in Sacramento about improving it. Where do you stand on this issue, Fran?
California Environmental Quality Act, I know about, there's a lot of good things about CEQA, and what I think is good about it, as not only a local government official and a homeowner who's lived in this great state their entire life, is that it requires at least a notification of all the impacts of a particular project and the cumulative impacts. Can you imagine if cities in the state were faced with putting in all that off-site traffic mitigation, regardless of traffic impacts? There are other mitigation measures that are required. So what does CEQA do? It identifies the impacts as required by law, requires an analysis of the mitigation of the impacts, allows for some circumstances of overriding considerations. Where the process has fallen apart, frankly, is the abuse of litigation to delay projects. And it hasn't just been by environmental groups. I have a story of a businessman in Agora Hills who sued under CEQA every time a rival business came into our community. If Home Depot wanted to build anywhere within 10 miles, he made sure there was litigation or initiative process. We need to come together, and I'll be working on a committee. It's a top priority with Darrell Steinberg and the state Senate to look at CEQA reform to provide some certainty for investment. Delay for delay's sake accomplishes nothing for anyone. So we need to preserve CEQA, but see if we can reform it in a way that can't be that abuse that's going on now.
Todd?
I think the key thing is, and regulations imposed upon businesses, they expect a certain amount of regulation in California, to some extent more than other states, but they need predictability. Okay? They have limited resources. They need to be able to forecast timelines to be competitive in their marketplace, and CEQA is preventing them from doing that. And I'm glad to hear there's revisions underway on this, but also if you create an emergency, you can also be the hero and reform something you had a part to play in earlier. So I think we need to bring more predictability, and this gets back to my earlier statement on regulations. Regulations need to be looked at in a cost-benefit analysis. Again, if it's the cost, regulations, either conforming someone's behavior or there's something, whatever the regulation, there is a cost associated to it. And again, if that benefit is not benefiting our society, is undermining our business climate, we need to revise it. It just needs to be revised. We don't need to hold on to it. And that applies to all regulations.
Thank you. I want to get a read on how many people have questions. Raise your hands if you have questions. Okay, we're going to get some questions from the audience, and I will go away from my script. You, sir.
Yeah, hi, my name is Ken Lane from the Adult Skills Center. We work with folks with developmental disabilities, helping them live within the community. What is your experience or philosophy with respect to closing developmental centers for consumers and having them and supporting their efforts to be living safely within the community?
Todd, why don't you give that a shot?
Well, maybe you could expound on that. How many are closing right now, and what impact is it having on people?
Well, an example is the Lanterman developmental center is in the process of closing, but the cost for keeping somebody in that environment can be close to $350,000 a year compared to having them live within the community with support from agencies like ours for a small fraction of that. So, but the unions and families of these folks seem to be blocking, seem to be blocking that. So I'm wanting to know your experience or your philosophy in terms of moving folks with developmental disabilities to help them integrate within the community as long as they get the support they need.
And why are the unions blocking it in your opinion?
Primarily because they have a lot of workers there, and a lot of the economy in Camarillo and other places is dependent on those folks having their jobs.
I think obviously there will be issues in addition to the issue that you bring out in the aggregate. In terms of when we look at, the key thing in California we have to realize is we have limited resources. And hopefully this may or may not answer your question directly. I personally don't have experience with disability, people with disabilities personally. However, my aunt's got MS. She's confined to a wheelchair, so I understand the frustrations that she has in dealing with that disability. But I think we have to look at all the services that we provide, or the resources that we have in this great state of California, is we have to look at them all, and we have to understand that there are limited resources. We really do, and I think in that we have to look at everything, whether or not it's education, public safety, the services that you're talking about, sir, and look at that, and it's and where we stand right now in California to properly address it. So I know that probably doesn't answer your question specifically, but I would take an interest in it, but I would have to look at it in the aggregate. Okay.
Fred.
I'm thoroughly knowledgeable of exactly what you asked. We have a series of state hospitals and illness centers that haven't closed. They're gradually closing so we can shift services in the community. My son is part of a work training program. He's a developmentally disabled adult. I've been part of a bipartisan caucus in Sacramento for the last 10 years, providing monies for work experience programs. I authored a bill this year that related to those developmental centers like Agnes or Lanterman as they gradually shut, and we move people into the communities with the full services they need to be an integrated part of society at a lot more affordable basis. Tried to pass a bill that would allow renting of those properties until they are sold in order to create that revenue stream that would follow people into the community that are disabled, to provide the services for their families that they need in order to have the dignity of living in their community. It's one of my top priorities. I serve on the Autism Select Committee for the state of California, and one of the biggest challenges this state will have is the number of people that are now in their 20s and 30s, but soon in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, that will need a place to live. 1 out of every 90 children are diagnosed with autism now. It's impacting our schools. There's going to be a wave of young adults getting older whose parents will not be able to take care of them forever. And so creating a program that was approved by the Lanterman Act in the state of California is critically important, and it's more cost effective to return the services and provide the services in the communities than those large, expensive facilities, but you have to close them with compassion.
Okay, thank you. Did you have?
Oh, wait, go where the mic is.
Well, I'm going where the hands went up first, but I guess I'll compromise.
Good morning, I'm Dave Birch. I would like to hear both of your outlook on the recently passed pension reform that I think's on the governor's desk right now.
He signed it.
He signed it?
Yeah.
Fran?
Yes. Yes, I was part of the vote on that measure. First measure, as long as I can remember, at least in recent history, that the state has moved forward. All the bargaining units for the state of California had reached a compromise where they've done all those things in their 50% match, their contributions with the employer, spiking to pad your salaries at the end of your career so you get way more than whatever you earned, all those abuses taken care of. Our challenge was, and the frustration was, because it's a contractual arrangement between the employer and the employee, for the state of California to tell local governments, frankly, where most of the abuses are, by those few number of people that are getting huge pensions, which was never the intent, who have padded them and abused them with outrageous salaries. People that are currently in office, their pensions have been contracted with their state government or county government or district attorneys or whatever. They can only be modified through reopening up negotiations for existing employees. So the state pension system applies to new employees, good step in the right direction to slow down the impact of pensions, which are not sustainable in the long term. But there's more work to be done, and I look forward to continuing to have that discussion, and will welcome your suggestions.
Todd, pension reform.
I think the key thing when it comes to pensions, this is not going to be necessarily the silver bullet that turns California around, but it needs to be addressed immediately and with the true intent to reform the pension problem. The problem with the current measure, it really just goes an eighth of the way at best. We're hundreds of millions of dollars underfunded in CalPERS. This addresses, the best estimate I've heard is 60 million, it says, or the lowest estimate is 30 million. So this, the timing is great, politically speaking, because the election's coming up. The general public is very concerned about pensions, as you've seen in San Jose, San Diego, what's happened in Stockton and San Bernardino. But this does not go far enough. And again, we need to get serious about this issue. We need to have the union leadership at the table to represent their members with an idea. Again, the key question we need to all ask ourselves is simply, is it sustainable? More benefits have been passed out during good times that simply were not able to be sustained during foreseeable economic downturns. In any economy, there's going to be economic downturns. So more benefits. And again, this distracts from what I said earlier. We have limited resources in this state, and the common good, everybody in this room, is being left behind. Because again, special interests have negotiated their way with legislatures over decades now to get to the front of the line of our immense resources. So we need to more aggressively address this issue to really get us on the right track with our limited resources that are just, our debt is just continuing to grow. So thank you.
Okay. Sir, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. I think people, both as individuals and as businesses, are concerned about the stalemate in terms of our political system, the problems at this point. And I'd like to hear from both of you about two parts of that. One, to the extent that there is this lack of cooperation across the aisles that prevents the two parties, members of the parties, from finding common ground on key issues in the state. That's one part of it. And secondly, what we're now looking at, perhaps as much as state levels in Washington, the effect of dark money, black money, money that doesn't have any transparency, that can come in from anywhere around the state, and it may not be actually promoting interest in the state interest. What would each of you do in terms of both of those issues?
Okay, Todd.
I think the people are sick and tired of the gridlock at the state level and at the national level. What I have found in my experience, Afghanistan's a very complicated war. There's many interests that are invested in the outcome of Afghanistan, and to be effective for me, to be effective over there, and the area of responsibility I had to reach across the table to Afghan military, Afghan government, British State Department, U.S. State Department, Danish, British, Bahraini, and Tongan forces. Each one, I said, with the different interests. And I had to have a lot of chai time. And I know it sounds, it's tea. I would have to drink a lot of tea and get to know them and find common ground and develop a rapport. Because the priorities that I'm running on should resonate with every legislator if their interest is to take care of their people and to be a public servant. And I emphasize the word servant to their people. and that means through their district, that we should find common ground, at least as it relates to these priorities. There may be ideological differences on other issues when there's a surplus or something like that. To answer your money on the dark money outside the state, obviously that's a concern, and that gets back to transparency and openness to the people. The people are entitled to openness with their government, I believe. That's how democracies work. Sometimes our freedom of the press fails us in terms of keeping us well informed. There's such a plethora of blogs and everything else out there. Anyone can be a reporter these days. But you need to have accurate information, true information as to our process, so you can hold accountable the elected officials you send up to Sacramento.
Okay, Fran?
Yes, thank you very much. That's a two-part question, is it not? I want to assure everyone that most of the time the legislature works very well together. And I think my background, 4 terms on the Agora Hills City Council and serving as the first mayor of Agora Hills was very helpful in that. Frankly, I was the only Democrat on the council, and but that didn't matter. You put the city first, you made the decisions, you passed the budget, you set your priorities. As long as you put the city first, it all worked out well, and they had enough respect for me that they elected me mayor for 4 times while I was on the council. So in our committee structure in Sacramento, that process is still in effect. I would say the vast majority of my bills have bipartisan support. I support a lot of Republican bills. It isn't as dysfunctional as what you hear in Washington, D.C. Republicans have bills, they get co-authors that are Democrats, with their hearings on the bills, there is a process, it is a lot more respectful. Where it's been challenging the last several years, to be frank with you, is the role of government and how you pay for it. For example, we need to improve our water delivery system. Everyone agrees with that. How do we pay for it? Is it by just GO bonds? What are government bonds costing hundreds of millions of dollars a year that take away the debt service from our general fund, that makes us cut programs for schools and developmentally disabled adults? Or do we have the beneficiaries of the new water delivery system, ag and urban water users, pay for those? So it's a combination of pay as you go and not just setting the debt on future generations. We're having a real difference of opinion on the role of government and how you pay for it, triggered by the recession.
Okay, thank you. Stuart, we have a question over here.
We have one right here.
We have one here, right here. Suzette Martinez, Los Angeles Universal Preschool. And my question to you is pretty simple. If elected, what would your commitment to the early childhood education industry, specifically preschool, be? And when I say industry, I just want there to be some recognition that it's not only preschool and service you're providing to children, but there's also a workforce industry as well as a business industry, because it is both a private sector industry as well as public.
Okay, Fran?
Yes, I've been a huge advocate of preschool. As a longtime teacher, I know, especially in this day and age, for kids to get off on a good start when they get to kindergarten, the first grade, they have to have that experience. They have to be ready to read. Kindergarten's like the old first grade used to be. Once they fall behind, the gap keeps growing. Those are the kids that are struggling. Those are the kids that are falling through the cracks for whatever reasons they have, language barriers, socioeconomic barriers. Preschool, access to quality preschool with trained educators, I think is one of the top priorities for the state of California. And I've talked to law enforcement people too. They say investing in preschool and quality K through 12 education would make their jobs a lot easier. You know, we as a society, if we don't educate everyone to their maximum potential, those are the kids that fall through the cracks, who get into trouble with drug and alcohol abuse, that get into our criminal justice system. So I will do, it's a money problem right now, but everything that we can to ensure that all children have access to a quality preschool experience, not just babysitting, we're not talking about that, but reading readiness, socialization skills that are critically important to succeed in today's world.
Take time.
Our education system, and this is a component of that, obviously, it really is time for education, and this would be rolled into what I'm about to say, is it's time for it to be successful and efficient. I'm deeply troubled with the K through 12 and preschool through K-12 education system we have here in California. 21,000 kids dropped out of between Ventura County and LA County last year. That's a tremendous number, and we're not fulfilling our moral obligation as a society, as the adults in our society, if that's the track record we have. Now, I do believe right now, the way the current education system is, it is way too centralized, and there's huge inefficiencies built into this very large bureaucracy right now. And unfortunately, it's not getting to the children where it really needs to get to. And I believe the local control, based on the categorical programs that are now being pushed down to the local level just because of the lack of funds, we need to encourage that. Again, the partnership with private and public school systems has tremendous value if utilized properly. Where school districts are not so